In this demo, I'm just going to quickly walk you through how to build a map using some of our data sets. So our mapping tools are located in the fourth row of the visualizations pane here, where we find the card visual. But over here on the left, we have our standard map visual and our filled map. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to build a regular map. I'm going to click on this and add it to our report. And as far as what we're going to actually visualize in our map, I'm going to grab units from our sales data set. I'm going to add that to size, which is going to determine the size of the bubbles in the map. You can see that that was enough to actually cause our map to start visualizing. Now, the only thing that we need to do is we need to give our map some kind of geographical field to visualize. So I have a table called geography, which is just identifying where our sales data are taking place. To my location field up here, I'm going to add state. And you can see that immediately the map is updated. And I'm going to add city as a layer below state. So now we have a map visual that's already built, and it should be showing us where the number of video game units that have been sold are highest. I was kind of expecting to see Texas and California and Florida be the highest values, and they are. And now if we go to our formatting options, we can change up the look of this map just a little bit and make it something a little bit better for our purposes. So I'm going to first look at the colors of these bubbles. I'm going to change the color of the bubbles to maybe just a medium navy. You can also turn on data labels for the map. In this case, it really makes everything look pretty crowded. I tend not to turn the data labels on for this map just because the map itself, for example, already says Florida. So it's a little bit redundant to label the bubble Florida as well. I'm just letting you know that this option is there, but I typically leave it turned off. You can adjust the size of the bubbles themselves. For example, if you want them to be very small or if you want them to be gigantic. Obviously, you don't want them to be that big because it makes them pretty much impossible to read. I'm just going to make them 10 for our purposes, which is still pretty large, but at least I can start to kind of tell them apart, especially as I zoom into the map. Even though I tend to zoom in and out with the wheel on my mouse, if you wanted to add buttons to the map for your users, all you have to do is just turn on zoom buttons, and then users can click on these to zoom in and out as well. But again, most mouse wheels will zoom into the map just fine. And the real big feature here for the maps that I enjoy showing people are the different map styles. So the default style for the map visual is the road theme. It's called the road theme because, look, as I drill in to a map, you can start to see some interstates, and if I kept going, you could start to see even highways within Louisville, Kentucky, which is very useful. But if you don't have data that's really designed around the roads, then the roads are really cool to have, but they're kind of distracting from the data. So I like to go for something a little bit simpler. Personally, I prefer the light theme, which you can see just kind of strips out a lot of the unnecessary detail. You can still see roads, but they're not quite as, they don't stand out quite as much. You also have the option to do an aerial theme or a dark theme, both of which I find just a little bit noisy and difficult to read. Or you can even do a grayscale theme. So just for the purposes of this, I like the grayscale because it's easy to read. It's easier to separate the oceans from the states, and there's not so much detail that it's distracting. So I'll leave this on for now. If you wanted to create a heat map instead of a bubble map, as I said earlier, it's literally as easy as just turning on a button. So if I turn this button on, you can now see that I'm creating a heat map. And then you can actually adjust the colors that make up the heat gradient, and you can change the size of the actual pixels. So if I change the radius from 10 to something larger, it's just going to make those heat map gradients that you see stand out a little bit more so that we can more easily find out where the higher concentrations of data are. For example, it looks like in the northeast part of the United States, California, Texas, Florida. And if we wanted to make this look like a more traditional heat map, then you can actually adjust the colors using these gradient stops from yellow to kind of a medium orange to a very dark red. And now that looks more like a standard heat map. And you can drill in and you can see that the heated areas continue to update as you drill, or as you zoom rather. And so I'm going to turn off the heat map for this so that I can demonstrate what happens if you want to drill into a specific state, for example, Florida. So if I go back to my field settings, you remember under location, I have city. So even though we're currently just looking at bubbles for each state, for example, if I hover over California or if I hover over Florida, I do have a layer underneath each state that I can drill into using the drill down setting here. So I'm going to turn on my drill down options and I'm going to drill into Florida. And what that's going to do is it's going to activate the city layer underneath of the state layer so that now I can actually view the number of video game units sold for each of these cities within Florida. For example, if I wanted to zoom into the Miami area and look at Miami compared to Miami Beach, compared to Fort Lauderdale, this is really the feature for the map visual that your users and stakeholders are going to love. They're going to absolutely love seeing this drill down feature for the first time, because this is something that chances are they haven't seen in a tool like, like any of the spreadsheets that they may have made visuals in previously. And they're going to love the interactivity of this. So the map visual is one of my favorites. As long as you have clean geographic data that you can give it, then users are going to love interacting with the map visual and drilling into the different layers that you have.